Alright guys, welcome back. Over the past couple of weeks I've had my 3D printer running on overtime, printing up several of the Games Workshop Forge World models, one of which was the Tyranid's Hierophant Bio-Titan, which was surprisingly easy to 3D print given the size of the model, but I was able to fit the main body of the model onto one plate, without having to split it up into several parts. And all in all, it took around 1 to 2 litres of resin to print this model, and as I'm using fairly cheap Sunlu ABS-like resin, the total cost was less than £25 worth of resin, which is a massive saving in comparison to the £340 odd that Games Workshop wants for the model. And for the assembly process, it was actually a lot easier than the previous Forge World Harridan that I'd actually purchased a few months back, which was a bit of a nightmare to sand down and fit all the parts together. But for this one, it just required a little bit of sanding on some of the support marks, and apart from that, just required piecing together. And with a little bit of super glue, the model is ready to be primed and painted. And when it comes to the priming and prepping of the model, I have done this several ways in the past. However, I now like to follow a set process which overall saves on time and produces the best results as well. And to do that, I start off with priming the entire model with black spray primer. I then come in with some white ink and apply a white zenithal over the top of the black primer. I'll then come in and paint all the armour panels in black. And the zenithal step is an optional step which provides a little bit more shade in the model. But if you don't want to do a zenithal highlight, you can just start off with a white primed model and then paint in all the armour panels in black. And as long as you achieve the goal of a white model with black armour plates, you should be good. And the first part of the painting process is to apply a 2-step dry brush highlight to all of the armour panels, using a combination of Army Painter, Night Sky and Runic Cobalt. With the first dry brush layer of the Night Sky being a fairly heavy dry brush, trying to hit all of the armour panels and edges. And to make sure I'm not applying too much paint on each dry brush pass, I'll be using a paper towel and dry brush palette, just to make sure that all of the excess paint has been wiped off before applying it to the model. And during this painting process, I didn't really have a good way of holding or supporting the model while I was painting it. Especially not if I wanted to record the process as well. So I just decided to wear some gloves and hold the model in my hand while painting, which isn't always the best idea, but sometimes it's the only option available. And for the Runic Cobalt pass, I will just reduce the amount of paint used on the brush and focus this layer more on the upward facing surfaces, making sure I leave plenty of the previous layer still visible. Now that the armour panels have been dealt with, it's time to add some colour to the model. Firstly by applying muted grey ink to all of the bones on the underside chest of the model. And I started using these inks on my previous video for the Grimdark von Ryan's Leaper, and I really like the way these inks behave. They have a very much contrast paint-like consistency, only a lot thinner, which means that it actually runs into all of the recesses a lot better than a contrast paint would. The only issue with these inks is that they are so thin that it will require 2 coats to get a nice smooth coverage, as the first coat will look a little bit patchy, but after applying a second coat it'll be perfect. And for all of the limbs on the model, I just use the same muted grey ink, and I'll just apply this ink to the top half of the limb, all the way down to the first elbow or knee joint. And because these inks have a much longer working time than contrast paints, it's easy enough to go in with a damp brush and feather out the ink into the white part of the limb, which just helps to provide a smoother transition between the 2 colours. Next up, I'm going to be using some muted pink ink to paint in all of the claws, horns, vents and scars that are across the model, and also to paint in the tongue, the head, the gums in the mouth, and also any of the organic parts of the guns as well. And just like the muted grey, I'm going to be applying 2 coats of this to all parts. Next up, I'm going to apply a quick dry brush highlight of some Army Painter Barbarian Flesh to all of the organic parts of the guns, which should give it a more realistic and gruesome look. Next up, it's time to add some Grimdark shade to the model, and to do that I'll be using Villainy Inks' Ichor of the Damned, which is slowly becoming one of my favourite black enamel washes. It's really nice and thin and has a little touch of brown in it. And it's really good for applying a quick and easy wash that gives a realistic looking Grimdark feel. And I'll be using a large brush for this and just applying this enamel wash to every part of the model and letting it flow into any areas that it wants to, and just leaving it overnight to dry without going in and performing any kind of removal process. And then after allowing that to dry overnight, I then applied a coat of matte varnish to the entire model to take away all of the shine from the previous enamel wash, before then going in with some villainy inks carrying crimson, and apply this to all of the desaturated pink areas on the model. And this should help push that grimdark feel for the model and give it a little bit more of a gory look. And to apply a final touch of gore to the model, I'm going to be applying some Yoo-hoo glue in between the claws and the teeth of the mouth, which is going to give the mouth a mucousy, bloody feel to it. And then finally I just go in with some Army Painter True Blood and apply this to all of the Yoo-hoo glue strands to give it a more gore-like look. And that's the model finished. I unfortunately don't have a base for this model, but I don't think a model of this size really needs one. And personally I'm really happy with the way the technique applied to a much larger model like the Bio-Titan has turned out. But let me know what you think and if you would do anything different in the comments down below. And next up I'm going to be painting another Forge World model, but I'll be keeping the model type a secret for now, as I'm planning to do something special with it and I'm not 100% sure how it's going to turn out. So keep an eye out for that video, hopefully coming in the next week or two. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.